Imagine a civilization like this. In its time, it was known as the capital of gold and silver. In the ancient world, everyone was aware of its existence. Its approach to governance and development was far ahead of its time, legendary by every measure. But today, no one knows how it disappeared. What we are certain of is this: there are no traces of war. It was not destroyed by invasion. The story has a beginning and a development, but its ending is unclear. And the strangest part is this: if there was no war and there was wealth, how could they possibly disappear? Do not say this civilization is merely a rumor. We are certain that such a civilization once existed. We will examine the evidence shortly. In this video, we will try to clarify that missing ending. This is the story of Tartessos. Enjoy watching. In ancient times, those who looked toward the west usually fell silent, because the direction of science and knowledge was the east. Writing came from the east. The gods spoke in the east. Kings who wore crowns were in the east. The west, however, was always silent. The sun set there. The day ended there. And the human mind has always feared endings. As a result, the west was often left blank on ancient maps. Sometimes monsters were drawn. Cliffs were imagined. It was considered the edge of the world. But Tartessos was the name that broke this silence. Why was the name Tartessos so important? In ancient texts, there are some monotonous names. You read them and move on. But there are other names. They linger in the mind. They take root in memory. They generate questions. Tartessos was one of those names. Greek writers never hesitate when mentioning it. They do not say, "It might have existed." They do not begin with, "according to rumors." When they speak of Tartessos, they speak as if describing a place they had seen. This is extremely important, because in the ancient world, the concept of imaginary places existed. But those were always described as myths. Myths are never told in the language of reality. That boundary is clear. The language of Tartessos is different. This is pure reality language. Of course, being real is not enough. To matter, a civilization must also be powerful. What makes a civilization powerful is not always its armies. Sometimes, fortune plays a role. And this is where the power of Tartessos begins. The Iberian Peninsula was a miracle for the ancient world. The land was overflowing with metal. Precious metals such as gold, silver, and copper. And the location of Tartessos was where these metals converged. But pay attention. This is not a city of gold fairy tale. This is, in a way, the story of the birth of global trade. Ships traveling to and from the east, Phoenician merchants, journeys lasting for months. Almost every ship whose bow turned west had a clear destination. Tartessos. Everyone may have gone there for trade, but why did the Phoenicians go? Understanding the Phoenicians is crucial, because they were not an ordinary people. They were not adventurers. They were not romantic. This part is extremely important. The Phoenicians were people who lived for their interests. Wherever they went, they sought profit. And they went to Tartessos. Because there were limitless minerals, safe harbors, and a strong yet non-aggressive order. This tells us something important. Tartessos was not a chaotic place. On the contrary, it was highly organized. There was room for every kind of person. Every order needs a face, and naturally, in the order of Tartessos, that face had a name, Argentonios. This name was not random. It was directly connected to silver and wealth. Argentonios is not described as a warrior king. He was not a conqueror. He was a figure who negotiated, formed alliances, and understood trade very well. If we were to coin a term for him, we might call him a merchant king. He supported ancient Greek cities. He provided them with financial aid. According to some accounts, he even helped Greek colonies survive. This is power, but a silent kind of power. Why was the power of Argentonios silent? Because during his era, there are no accounts of war. This is highly unusual. In the ancient world, when a king is mentioned, there is usually blood, conquest, and betrayal. But none of these happened to Tartessos. This civilization did not grow through war. It did not expand through force. It did not rule by instilling fear in its people. Like Argentonios, the kings of Tartessos may have used wealth as a political tool to build friendships, and perhaps in this way they prevented wars. And that made them dangerous, because history does not favor silent powers. Now let us slowly approach the big question. Think about it. How could a civilization that was wealthy, famous in its time, and recorded in written sources simply disappear? The civilization emerged around 1200 BCE and experienced its most prosperous periods between the 9th and 6th centuries BCE. But after the 6th century BCE, something happened, and no one knows what it was. Sources fall silent. The name disappears. Maps become empty. It is as if someone wrote the story, but left the ending unfinished. But do not worry. We are close to understanding what happened. Today, many researchers search for the traces of Tartessos around the Guadalquivir River. But this is not merely a matter of choosing a dig site. It is an attempt to explain a disappearance. Because in ancient times, sea levels were different, riverbeds were different, and coastlines were constantly changing. This means that Tartessos was not destroyed, not burned, and not invaded. How do we know this? For archaeologists, destruction is a blessing, because destruction leaves traces. It helps solve mysteries. Burned layers, collapsed walls, mass graves. These provide answers to many questions. But none of these exist clearly for Tartessos. This leads to a disturbing thought. Perhaps Tartessos was not destroyed by force. Perhaps something far more unsettling happened. When historians cannot resolve the issue, they sometimes try to explain it through another concept, Atlantis. And here, instead of clarity, the matter becomes even more tangled. Plato describes Atlantis as follows. It was located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, in the west. It was extraordinarily wealthy. It possessed a maritime trade network, and it disappeared mysteriously. Doesn't this description sound strikingly similar to Tartessos? Could the famous Atlantis have been Tartessos? Aside from a small gap, all the pieces seem to fit. But that small gap is important. Plato dates Atlantis to around 9600 BCE. The most active periods of Tartessos, however, were between 900 and 600 BCE. Yet this 1,000-year discrepancy does not completely invalidate the theory, because Plato based his accounts on ancient Egyptian sources. And when some historians examine the terminological details, they suggest that the numerical system used in ancient Egypt may have caused a zero to be lost when translated into ancient Greek. Given the numerical conventions of the time, this is a plausible possibility. Still, this argument does not turn theory into proof. It merely supports it. Let us focus on other possible explanations. The heart of a civilization is not always a temple or a palace. In Tartessos, the heart was trade routes. As mentioned earlier, the power of Tartessos came from its minerals. But if you cannot sell minerals, they are nothing more than ornaments. This is where the true vulnerability emerges. So what went wrong? In the 6th century BCE, the Mediterranean world underwent a major transformation. The Phoenicians advanced. As I said, they lived for their interests. They did not remain idle. New powers emerged. Trade balances shifted completely. And in this new world, Tartessos ceased to be a center. For this civilization, this was not a sudden death, but a slow collapse. Wealth can sometimes be a shield, sometimes a key, and sometimes a target. The wealth of Tartessos made it powerful, but also turned it into a target. Because wealth generated envy, created rumors, and was exaggerated. All of this caused the civilization to become a focal point of resentment, and that turned it into a political threat. It appears that Tartessos did not fall to war, but to a balance game. So how was this done? A civilization can be destroyed by war, occupation, or invasion, but it can also be slowly suffocated. How might that have happened? By no longer being mentioned, by being removed from trade networks, by being erased from political memory. It is highly likely that this is what happened to Tartessos, because when other rising centers were supported in its place, new favored ports were established, new trade routes were used. The minerals of Tartessos turned into mere ornaments, and thus it was forgotten. Isn't this too sophisticated a method of destruction for the ancient world? Then why are you probably hearing about this civilization for the first time? Because history loves drama. And by drama we mean war, betrayal, destruction, blood, and tears. Heroic epics too. But Tartessos was not dramatic. It grew through trade. It gained strength quietly. It lived through stability. And perhaps because of this, history chose not to emphasize it. Probably Tartessos will never be taught in schools. History books may avoid writing about it. It may not find much space in discussions. Only perceptive minds will draw lessons from forgotten worlds and uncover the differences. And they will likely be the ones who win. Because remember this, for those who do not learn from history, time only repeats itself. Follow for more stories from forgotten worlds.